The last time I saw my daughter's face without cruelty in it, she was 23 years old, and I had just signed a paper that gave her everything I own. The paper was warm from the printer, and the pen made a small scratch sound, and I did not read the fine print because she was crying happy tears and hugging my neck and whispering, "Mum, you have saved my life." But 6 years later, I stood in a supermarket queue watching her pay for organic vegetables with a card that had my name on it, and she did not see me, or she pretended not to while I held a single loaf of bread, the cheap one. I thought my secret did not make her rich. My silence did. I was not always poor, and that is the secret no one knows. Before the small flat and the night shifts and the second-hand clothes, there was a house with a garden in a quiet village outside Bristol, and my husband Thomas was a surveyor who worked hard and died quickly from a heart attack on a Tuesday morning when he was 51 and I was 48 and our daughter Chloe was 19 and in her second year of university. Thomas left me a life insurance policy worth £220,000, which was not a fortune, but it was safety. I could pay off the mortgage and live without fear, and that was the plan. But Chloe came to me 3 weeks after the funeral and sat on my sofa wearing Thomas's old jumper and said, "Mum, I have a business idea about a small cafe with organic food and ethical coffee." She had a notebook full of drawings and numbers, and her eyes were bright as she said, "I just need 50,000 to start, and I will pay you back in 3 years." I said yes because she was my daughter, and she was hurting, and the money was just money. The cafe opened and was called Chloe's Table, and it did well then, very well. Then she wanted a second location, then a third. Each time she came to me saying, "Mum, I need another loan, or the bank is slow, or you believe in me, don't you?" And each time I said yes. I stopped counting after the first 100,000, and I signed papers I did not understand and transferred money from accounts I had never named. I told myself this was investment, and this was family, and this was love. But love does not ask you to empty your future, and love does not hand you a pen and say, "Just sign here, don't worry about the details." The moral fault line was not her greed at first, but my pride. I did not want to be the mother who said no, and I did not want to be the widow who hoarded her dead husband's money. I wanted to be helpful, and I wanted to be needed, and I kept signing while she kept taking. The trigger was not loud, but a letter in a brown envelope from a solicitor's office, which I opened on a Thursday evening, revealing that Chloe had taken a second mortgage on my house. The house Thomas and I bought together. The house with the garden he had planted. She had used my signature. A signature I did not remember giving. I called her, but she did not answer. I called again, and she texted, "In a meeting, call you later." Later came at 9 that evening with her voice tight as she said, "Mum, it was just a business decision because the cafe needed cash flow, and the bank offered better terms with property as security." I said, "You used my house without asking me," and she said, "I told you about it, but you don't listen." I listened every single day to her talk about profit margins and supplier contracts and customer reviews. I listened so much that I forgot to listen to the small voice inside me that said stop. She said, "Mum, the house will be fine because the business is growing, and in 2 years you won't even remember this conversation." But I remembered every word because that was the moment I understood that my secret was not the money, but that I had become a ghost in my own life. I was signing away my safety to a daughter who now spoke to me like I was a junior employee. She did not say thank you, and she did not say I love you. She said, "You don't listen." That was the sharp turning point when I hung up the phone and walked to the kitchen and made a cup of tea, which I did not drink, but watched go cold. I thought my secret made her rich, but her secret is that she was never planning to stay. The first escalation happened 6 months later when I needed a small operation on my knee due to arthritis. The doctor said it was routine, but I would need 4 weeks of recovery with no driving and no stairs. I asked Chloe if I could stay with her for 2 weeks at her large flat above her flagship cafe, which had 3 bedrooms with 1 empty. She said, "Mum, that is not really possible because we are renovating the guest room and there is dust everywhere." I said I can sleep on the sofa, and she said the sofa is being recovered. I said, "When will it be ready?" And she said, "Ask me next month." I did not ask next month. I paid for private carer instead. A young woman named Fatima, who came for 2 hours each morning, helping me shower and making me toast, and asking about my husband Thomas. I told her stories, and she laughed at the right places. A stranger showed me more kindness than my own daughter. The second escalation was financial. I started getting letters from the bank with late payment notices and overdraft fees from accounts I did not know existed. I went to the branch with the letters in my hand, and the manager, a young man with kind eyes, said, "Mrs. Evans, did you know that your daughter is listed as a joint signatory on all your accounts?" I said no, and he showed me the paperwork with my signature and Chloe's signature dated 3 years ago. I asked him to freeze the accounts, but he said he could not without Chloe's permission because she was a joint owner. I asked how much was left, and he typed, and his face changed as he said, "Mrs. Evans, there is approximately £4,000 remaining. £220,000 gone. Spent on cafe expansions and marketing campaigns, and a flat I had never been invited to visit." I walked out of the bank and sat on a bench outside where a pigeon landed near my feet. I watched it peck at a discarded chip, and I thought that pigeon is richer than me because at least it has a chip. The third escalation was the worst. It came in the form of a phone call from Chloe, who was excited with her voice high and fast, as she said, "Mum, great news. We got an offer from a national chain to buy Chloe's table all 3 locations for £800,000. I said, "That is wonderful," and she said, "I know I am going to be rich." She did not say we but I. I asked, "What about my investment?" And she paused, then said, "Mum, we will talk about that later. Right now, I need to focus on the deal." That phrase, "we will talk about that later," is the cousin of never. I had heard it before from her father before he died, and from friends who borrowed money and forgot, and from my own mother who promised to visit and never came. Later is a word that lazy people use when they mean never. She sold the cafes and deposited the money into an account I could not access. She bought a house in a village 40 miles away and sent me a photograph with a text. No call. Just a photograph with 3 words, "New home, finally." I replied, "Congratulations," and she replied, "Thanks." 2 letters, and that was our conversation. My daughter had become a stranger who texted in lowercase. The midpoint came when I was cleaning my wardrobe on Thomas's side. The side I had not touched in 7 years. I found an old shoebox containing his work diaries and a small velvet pouch which held a signet ring. His father's ring. Thomas had told me once that the ring was worth something. Not a fortune, but something. I took the ring to a jeweler. An old man with a magnifying glass attached to his spectacles who examined it for a long time, then said, "Mrs. Evans, this is a very fine piece. 18-carat gold Victorian, and I can offer you £2,000. £2,000, which was more than half of what I had left in the bank. I almost cried, but I did not. I said yes, and he wrote a check which I deposited. That night I sat on my bed, holding the empty velvet pouch, and I made a decision. I called Chloe, and she answered on the 4th ring with her voice distracted, saying, "Mum, I am in the middle of something." I said, "I need to talk to you about the money you borrowed," and she sighed. That small sharp sound like a needle dropping on a wooden floor. She said, "Mum, we have been over this because the cafes were a joint venture, and you took a risk, and it did not pay off for you, but that is business." I said I did not take a risk because I gave you my entire inheritance, and she said that was your choice. I said it was my choice because you were my daughter, and she said, "And now I am a businesswoman, you need to separate those things." I hung up and did not cry. I opened Thomas's shoebox again and found his will. A copy dated 2 years before he died, in which he wrote, "I leave everything to my wife Margaret, and I express my hope that she will use this money to secure her own future, not to fund the dreams of others no matter how much she loves them." He knew. Thomas knew what I was, a giver, a soft touch, a woman who would empty her own plate to fill her child's bowl. He wrote that hope because he understood that love without boundaries is not love but surrender. That was the midpoint. I reframed everything and realized I was not a victim but a volunteer. I had chosen to give, and now I had to choose to stop. I did not hire a lawyer, or file a lawsuit, or write an angry social media post. I did something quieter and more dignified. I stopped. I stopped answering her calls immediately and let them ring. I stopped replying to her texts within minutes, but waited hours then days. I stopped asking about her life and stopped offering my opinion and stopped being available. She noticed after 2 weeks and called 3 times in one evening. I answered the third call, and she said, "Mom, are you okay? Because you have been quiet." I said, "I am fine," and she said, "You seem different." I said, "I am different." She asked what that meant, and I said, "It means I am no longer your bank." She laughed a nervous laugh, saying, "Mom, don't be dramatic." I said, "I am not being dramatic, but honest. You took £220,000 from me, and you put a mortgage on my house, and you emptied my accounts, and you never said thank you." She was silent, then said, "I will pay you back." I said when, and she said when I can. I said that is not an answer, and she said that is the only answer I have. I said then, I have nothing more to say. I hung up and made a cup of tea which I drank while it was hot and started my plan. First, I went to the bank and closed every joint account. That required Chloe to sign a form, but she refused at first. I said then, "I will tell the local paper the story of how you built your business," and she signed within 24 hours. Second, I contacted a housing solicitor who said the mortgage on my house was legal, but I could challenge it if I could prove my signature was obtained under pressure. I said, "I do not want a fight. I want peace." He said then, "You need to separate your finances completely." I did that by opening a new account at a different bank and transferring the remaining £4,000 plus the $2,000 from Thomas's ring. £6,000 became my new starting point. Third, I changed my will and left everything to a local charity that helps elderly women who have been financially abused by family members. The irony was not lost on me. I would become the person I was now trying to save. I did not tell Chloe about the will or the charity or anything. I simply stopped being her mother in the way she had defined it. I stopped being her safety net and her emergency fund and her emotional punching bag. The climax came 8 months later. Chloe had married a man named James, a wealthy accountant with a soft voice and hard eyes. They had a wedding in Tuscany where I was not invited. I watched the photographs on social media on a stranger's phone and a stranger's screen. But the real climax was not the wedding. It was a Tuesday afternoon 6 weeks after she returned from her honeymoon. My doorbell rang, and I opened it to find Chloe standing there, looking tired with unwashed hair. She was wearing expensive clothes that hung on her like borrowed things. She said, "Mom, I need to talk to you." I stepped aside, and she came in and sat on my sofa. The same sofa where she had sat 19 years ago, asking for £50,000. She did not look at the room, but at her hands, as she said, "James and I are separating. He took control of the business accounts, and I have nothing left except a house with a mortgage I cannot pay and a car that is being repossessed next week." I said nothing, and she said, "Mom, I need help." I looked at my daughter, the girl who had once drawn coffee shop logos on napkins, the woman who had taken everything I owned and called it business. She was not crying. She was waiting for me to open my wallet and say yes, because I was her mother and mothers always say yes. but I did not say yes. I said, Chloe, I have £6,000 in my bank account, and that is everything I own in the world. I am 62 years old with arthritis in my knee, sleeping alone, in a house that still smells like your father's tobacco. I cannot save you. Not because I do not love you, but because I cannot afford to love you the way you want me to love you. Her face changed. The waiting turned into disbelief, then anger, then coldness. She stood up, saying, so that is it. You are going to let me drown. I said no. I am going to let you swim. She walked to the door and paused with her hand on the handle, saying, you were always selfish. Even Dad said it. You only think about yourself. I said, your father never said that, and you know it. She left and the door closed. I heard her car start and drive away. I stood in my hallway for a long time. Then I went to the kitchen and made toast, which I ate slowly. I thought about Thomas and his will and his hope. I thought about the £6,000, which was not much but was mine. No one had signed it away, and no one had borrowed it, and no one had promised to pay it back with interest and then forgotten. That was the climax. Not a victory or a defeat. A woman eating toast in a quiet house. That was 3 years ago. Chloe did not lose everything because her husband's family gave her money. She opened a small bakery in the village. She calls me on my birthday, once a year, for calls that last 4 minutes. She tells me about her sourdough, and I tell her about my knee. We do not mention the money, or the house, or the years between us. I have not visited her bakery, and she has not visited my home. We exist in a careful parallel, like two trains on separate tracks. We can see each other, but we do not stop. The charity I named in my will sends me a newsletter every quarter. I read about women who lost their savings to sons and daughters and husbands and brothers. I am not alone. That is the small comfort. Loneliness is not unique. It is just quiet. I still have Thomas's signet ring box, empty, but I keep it on my bedside table. Not because I am waiting for the ring to return, but because I need to remember that something precious once lived there. Just because it is gone does not mean it was not real. The lesson I learned is this: you can love someone with your whole chest and give them your husband's legacy and your house and your peace. They can still walk away. Not because you failed, but because they chose to. A choice is not a reflection of your worth, but a reflection of their hunger. My secret did not make Chloe rich, but my silence did. But my voice is back now. Small and tired, but mine. I still make toast every morning and drink tea while it is hot. I sit by the window watching the street. When I see a young mother walking with her daughter, I do not feel envy, but recognition. I see myself 20 years ago carrying a child who did not yet know how to say the word enough. If you have ever given everything to someone who forgot your name, please hear this. You are not a bank, and you are not a safety net. You are a person who loved. That love was real, even if it was not returned. Please like and subscribe for more real life stories, and share your story in the comments, because you are not as alone as you feel.